Critical Literacy in Secondary Classrooms by Amanda LeBlanc. Critical literacy is a stance, mental posture, or emotional and intellectual attitude that readers, listeners, and viewers use as they interact with texts of all kinds, including written material, but also media texts, oral texts, and graphic texts. Critical literacy challenges common assumptions and values while focusing on issues of power and attending explicitly to things such as racial, class, gender, and sexual orientation differences. It teaches a set of skills, dispositions, and strategies that enable teachers and students to challenge text and life as they know it in order to become critical consumers and users of information. By examining these differences and relationships, users of critical literacy can reflect on and use their literacy practices to take action for social justice. One major part of critical literacy is understanding that the reading or viewing of texts is shaped by the attitudes and values of the readers, at the same time as the text is influencing and constructing readers' responses. It involves imagining multiple perspectives and possibilities. Some key concepts of critical literacy are acknowledging that 1. All texts are constructions. Most messages that we base our view of reality on are the product of many decisions and determining factors. The author's attitudes, interpretations, and conclusions are all built into the text. 2. All texts contain belief and value messages. All texts reflect bias and opinions of authors and creators, whether it is intentionally manipulative or not. 3. Each person interprets messages differently. Prior experiences and knowledge play a role in how we interpret a message. 4. Texts serve different interests. All texts are produced intentionally for a purpose, whether that purpose is ideological, political, or commercial. And finally, each medium develops its own language in order to position readers or viewers in certain ways. TV programs, websites, and novels each create meaning differently by using distinct techniques, conventions, and aesthetics. Critical literacy ties strongly into the 4 resources model. Code breaking is being able to recognize letters, words, sentence structure, and grammar in order to break the code of text. This is basic or functional literacy. Making meaning is when students are taught to be text participants rather than just consumers, and use their prior knowledge and experience when interpreting what the author is saying and while they are deconstructing text. Using text is when students need to be introduced to different forms of text and how these different forms have different uses. Students need to understand that meaning is tied to the author's purpose and to the context a text is interpreted and read in. Analyzing text is when students ask, what is this text trying to convince me of, and why? This involves uncovering what is said in order to uncover and challenge assumptions and ideas about the world, and responding when students disagree and take social action. Students need to understand that text can be changed to recognize or include missing voices and alternative perspectives. Critical literacy can be taught by juxtaposing texts on a similar topic to highlight a range of possible perspectives. An example of this would be using two editorials with opposing viewpoints. Teachers can also use examples from everyday life, such as commercials, to make critical literacy more engaging. Posing and teaching students to pose questions that problematize text and invoke thinking about language, text, and power issues also helps. Such questions include, what perspectives are omitted? What view of the world and what values does the text present? Whose interests are being served by the text? How does the language in a text position you as a reader? Does the use of an active or a passive voice position you in a certain way? Switching helps students to consider which voices are absent and which are present in a text. Examples of switching include switching the gender of key characters, switching the setting to a different time, place, or social class, or an emotional switch. In order for students to feel comfortable expressing and developing their critical literacy skills, they need to feel comfortable and safe in the classroom. Critical literacy works best when students draw on their prior or background knowledge of a topic, when the climate of the classroom is respectful, when all students are encouraged to participate in the discussion, and when there is sufficient modeling and wait time for the students to be able to respond to the text. Now I will show you an example of how you could teach critical literacy in a grade 11 social studies classroom. Most social studies teachers strive to include critical thinking in their classrooms already, but critical literacy is an extension of critical thinking. You want your students to be able to look at the sources they read critically, and because most texts put forward the grand narrative as the only perspective, it is important for social teachers in particular to point out the social injustices that are perpetuated in almost all texts. Here I have a commercial that could be shown in the classroom and provide a good opportunity for students to begin practicing critical literacy in this digital age. We will now watch the I Am Canadian commercial from Molson Canadian, which relates to nationalism and ultranationalism in Canada, and afterwards we'll discuss some of the techniques that could be used to look at this text through critical literacy.
Hey, I'm not a lumberjack or a fur trader, and I don't live in an igloo or eat blubber or own a dog sled, and I don't know Jimmy, Sally, or Susie from Canada, although I'm certain they're really, really nice. I have a prime minister, not a president. I speak English and French, not American, and I pronounce it about, not about. I can proudly sew my country's flag on my backpack. I believe in peacekeeping, not policing. Diversity, not assimilation, and that the beaver is a truly proud and noble animal. A toque is a hat, a Chesterfield is a pouch, and it is pronounced Z, not Z. Canada is the second largest landmass, the first nation of hockey, and the best part of North America. My name is Joe, and I am Canadian. Thank you.
This video shows what it means to be Canadian from the dominant perspective, a middle-aged, middle-class, cisgendered white male. There are several societal power issues at play here, including class, sexual orientation, race, and gender. This commercial can give students an opportunity to use switching in a classroom outside of English. You can ask your students whose voices are missing, and then you can ask them how the commercial would change if Joe was an Aboriginal person, a Francophone, a woman, or an immigrant. This could give them a chance to see being Canadian from a different perspective, and the students in the classroom that are not from Canada or have different cultural backgrounds would be able to bring their own unique background knowledge into this activity. Another appropriate critical literacy strategy would be using a think aloud method. This method will help students who may not quite understand the concepts that are being presented, because by hearing their teacher and their peers discuss their thoughts explicitly, students who are struggling will be able to hear thought processes being spoken aloud. It will also help facilitate a class discussion to help students really engage with using critical literacy on real-life texts. These methods will help students in all classrooms because it will get away from the idea that text refers to written material only, and it will give students a chance to use critical literacy on something they have possibly never thought twice about before: commercials. Using this video would also be good for English language learners because it is not necessary to understand every word that is being said. Students will still be able to think critically about the commercial just from what is being visually shown. It would also be possible, as the class is discussing, to have some kind of graphic organizer on the board for the teacher to write down important observations on and create visual connections for the students to see. An example of a graphic organizer that a teacher could use when teaching critical literacy is something like a spider web with a question in the middle, and then students could fill out the organizer with responses to the question. In conclusion, critical literacy is a stance, mental posture, or emotional and intellectual attitude that readers, listeners, and viewers use when interacting with texts of all kinds. It challenges common assumptions and beliefs while focusing on issues of power. It can also be taught in the classroom using methods such as problem posing, juxtaposition, or switching. Critical literacy involves creating a safe environment and allowing students to use their background knowledge and experience to help them be more engaged with learning. Think aloud, questioning the author, and graphic organizers are good methods and resources to use while teaching critical literacy. This shows students that even seemingly insignificant commercials are created for a purpose and can perpetuate issues of power. Thank you for taking the time to watch this screencast, and I hope it helps you in the future.